Hello and welcome to PMCLounge.com. Today we are discussing the estimate activity resources process. So the process is called estimate activity resources. Let's get into it. So typically when we discuss a process, we like to show you where we are. Where are we with estimate activity resources? So this is where we are. Estimate activity resources is a process in the knowledge area known as project resource management. Earlier, this process was actually part of the schedule management knowledge area, but now it is part of the resource management knowledge area. Also, this knowledge area up till PMBOK 5 or PMBOK 5 was known as human resource management, right? But now it is only known as resource management. So this process is part of resource management knowledge area and the planning process group. So this is where it falls, estimate activity resources. And like I mentioned earlier, this was earlier a part of the schedule management knowledge area and not the resource management knowledge area. So what do we do in this process? It's pretty simple and you can make it out from the name itself, right? You are estimating resources. That is what you're doing. And you already know all the inputs for this process except one, which is resource calendars. And we will discuss resource calendars in this video. But before I proceed, I'd like to let you know that over at pmclounge.com, we don't deal with processes talking about their inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. That is not something we like to do. We try to understand the concepts behind these processes instead of, making sure that you superficially just learn the ITTOs. That is not the intent of the PMP exam, and that is not the intent of this video. By the way, a related article on this process is also available on pmclounge.com. The first link in the description will take you there. If you want to read and not watch a video, then go ahead and read that article. First link in the description. Also, before we discuss further, pmclounge.com/resources is where we have listed our best and most favorite PMP preparation books. So if you're looking for them, head over to pmclounge.com/resources. All right, let's talk about resource calendars, the one thing that I mentioned in the previous slide. So the most important thing about resources that you would need for your project is their availability, right? So you need a lot of resources. And by the way, what is a resource is something we have discussed in a previous video. I'll share the link to that video as well in the description. So if you want to refresh your memory, you can check that video out. So we have already discussed what is a resource, and we already know that you need all kinds of resources. You need different kinds of resources for your project to complete your project. And the most important thing to know about those resources is their availability. When are they available? So resource calendars, which is an input in this process, is going to give you the information of the availability of these resources. Now, you need to note that resources like consultants, so testing environments, training rooms. So we have discussed this in the previous video on resource as well, that resources are not just human resources. Resources can be a lot of other things as well. So testing environment is also a resource. Your training room is also a resource. So resources like these are not readily available all the time. Your project team could be something which is readily available, but testing environment, right, is something which might not be readily available, and you need to schedule these kind of resources in advance. And that's the reason you need to know when these resources are available so that you can create a schedule for your project. Now we'll quickly go over the tools and techniques that are used in this process. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't typically go into detail of every input, every tools and techniques, and every output, because that is not how you study for PMP. But in this process, we would like to do so because there are a certain new tools and techniques which have been mentioned as part of this process. So expert judgment, you already know about this. We have a dedicated video on expert judgment. I'll share the link to that as well in the description if you want to check that out. There's another tool which is alternative analysis, and what you basically do here is you consider different options of assigning the resources for a project, both the number of resources and the amount of time they would need to be used as part of the project, right? Next tool is published estimating data. So there are articles, journals, books, if you want to, reports, if you want to refer to them, these are available out there in the industry. You can refer to them so that you can make an assumption and make a, not an assumption but a good informed decision about the estimation, right? So the estimation, I'd like to go back to that point. The estimation here is from expert project managers on their already delivered projects. So this data is something that can be helpful. Next one is project management software, as simple as MS Project. You would need that for, as part of this process. And finally, bottom-up estimating. And you might have already used this tool. You might have not realized that it is called bottom-up estimating. So what you basically do is you break complex activities. Let's say you have a complex activity, you can break it down into simpler pieces. And for each simple piece, single and simple piece, each of that you do estimation. So this is known as bottom up estimation. You do estimation for simpler pieces, which are broken down from a complex activity, and you add them up so that you get an estimation of the entire complex activity. So these were some of the tools and techniques that are used as part of this process. Moving on, one of the most important output of this process is the resource breakdown structure, also known as RBS. By the way, does it ring a bell on work breakdown structure, WBS? Yeah, so this is the resource version of the breakdown structure. So RBS is basically a hierarchical model. It's similar to WBS, which is also a hierarchical model. So RBS is also a hierarchical model. It is used to identify, list, and break down. So you need to make sure you understand these three: identify, list, and break down the resources used in facilitating and completing the project. So what are the resources that you would need to complete a project? You need to identify them, you need to list them, you need to break them down into their hierarchies, right? So this is what RBS is used for. Now the RBS is going to include the personal resources, which means the human resources which are needed for your project. And this will also include resources on which funds will be spent. Now, this is important. So in addition to noting down the human resources, you are also noting down resources on which the project funds will be spent. So what could these resources be? These could be personnel, which is human resource. These could be tools. You've got machinery, you've got materials, you've got equipment, fees, licenses. All of these are resources which you will be listing down in your resource breakdown structure. Now, an important thing to note here is money is not considered a resource in the RBS, right? So only those resources that will cost money are included, but money in itself is not an entry that you will see in your resource breakdown structure. Now let's look at an example of RBS. So this is an example RBS. Number one is engineering. Notice how this is a hierarchical structure, right? So number one is engineering. 1.1 is the manager of engineering, Fred Jones. Then you've got people reporting to Fred Jones, which is Ms. Jane Wagner, who is the architectural lead. Then you've got 1.1.3, which is software design team and resources. Now we are going further down in the hierarchy and naming the design team and resources, right? So these are the names of the design team members, and then you have a resource standard time sheet. Now this is not a human resource. This is also a resource, but not a human resource, right? So we are also including that as part of your RBS, not just human resources, right? Then you've got Microsoft Project, which is a software again. You've got SQL Server, which is a server of sorts, a database, and then you've got another hierarchy under Fred Jones itself. You've got hardware architecture team and resources. These are the names of the folks. And then you've got test stand A, so this is the environment for test stand. Then you've got test stand B, this is the environment for test stand B, right? So this is how an RBS is created, and an RBS is an important output of this process because it will give you an idea of all the resources that you would need, and with resource calendars you are going to get their availability as well, and that is going to help you create the resource breakdown structure. So I hope this video was helpful. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon if you haven't done so already. And do check us out on our official website, pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP resource. As always, check us out on our social media. Our handle is PMC Lounge on Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube. Thank you.